The depot sat at the end of a gravel access road, three prefab structures arranged in a horseshoe around a gravel lot. I'd driven 16 hours from Edmonton to reach it, pushing through fatigue as the paved roads gave way to packed dirt and the radio stations faded to static. My acceptance letter had promised $28 an hour plus hazard pay, nearly double what I'd made at my last trucking job. I killed the engine of my 20-year-old Chevy and checked the time, 4:36 in the afternoon. The sun already hung low behind the wall of black spruce surrounding the clearing. October in northern Alberta meant darkness came early and stayed late. The middle building had a metal sign, Northern Reach Logistics. Inside smelled of coffee grounds and cigarette smoke that had soaked into the wood paneling. A radiator clanked in the corner, fighting against the first real cold snap of the season. Miller, a thick-necked man with cropped gray hair, looked up from a desk cluttered with manifests and coffee-stained maps. "That's me." I set my duffel on the linoleum floor. "James Miller." He grunted. "Robert Miller. No relation, I'm guessing." "Don't think so." Robert pulled a clipboard from a stack and slid it across the counter. "Commercial license, health card, sign these 4 places." He tapped yellowed fingernails against each line. I filled out the paperwork while he made a call on a landline phone, speaking in the clipped sentences of someone who'd been coordinating logistics for decades. The walls held faded safety posters and a large map of northern Alberta with red pins marking what I assumed were delivery points. Most clustered around something called the Athabasca Formation. "Your rig's the Peterbilt 379. Robert handed me a key attached to a plastic fob. "Berth 6 in the building east of here. You roll out at 1900. Standard procedure so far. Nothing about the place seemed worth the premium pay they'd advertised. "One more thing." Robert reached under the counter and produced a white laminated card about the size of an index card. He placed it flat on the counter and pushed it toward me with 2 fingers, like he was sliding over something illicit. I picked it up. 4 numbered items in bold black text. 1. If you see a man in the road, do not stop. 2. If you see an upside-down road sign, do not stop. 3. If you see the same car twice, take the opposite turn it did. 4. If you hear a child's laughter, stop immediately and turn off your lights. I flipped the card over, blank on the back. "Company policy?" I asked, unable to keep the skepticism from my voice. Robert's face remained expressionless. "Highway 63 has its quirks. Drivers who follow the rules come back. Some who don't. I waited for him to crack a smile or add something that would make this make sense. He just held my gaze, weathered face, giving away nothing. "Right." I slipped the card into my breast pocket. "Anything else I should know?" "Manifests in the cab, 240 miles to the Nighthawk mining camp. 12 hours there and back if you don't stop for more than fuel and bathroom." He turned back to his computer. "Spotty radio past mile 87. No cell service after mile 115. I nodded and shouldered my duffel. "I'll check out the rig." "Miller," Robert called as I reached the door. When I turned, he'd already gone back to his paperwork. "Those aren't suggestions." The air bit at my face as I crossed to the eastern building. Probably some hazing ritual for new drivers, I figured. Scare the new guy with ghost stories about the haunted highway. I'd dealt with worse at previous companies. The Peterbilt was older but well-maintained, its engine compartment spotless when I popped the hood. I ran through the pre-trip inspection, checking fluid levels and tire pressure while the last daylight drained from the sky. By the time I'd loaded my personal gear and reviewed the manifest, mining equipment, dried goods, medical supplies, full darkness had settled over the depot. At 7 sharp, I pulled onto the access road. The truck's headlights carved twin cones through the darkness, illuminating the dense wall of trees on either side. 20 minutes later, I reached the junction with Highway 63, a 2-lane blacktop that disappeared into the forest in both directions. I turned north. The speedometer settled at 60 miles per hour, the engine's rumble of familiar comfort. My headlights occasionally caught reflective animal eyes watching from the tree line. A half-moon provided just enough light to see the black mass of forest stretching endlessly on both sides. 3 hours in, I hadn't passed a single vehicle. The isolation started to work its way under my skin. I reached for the radio, twisting the dial through static until I found a distant station playing classic rock. The signal faded in and out, sometimes disappearing completely for minutes at a time. Mile marker 117 appeared in my headlights, the reflective numbers providing momentary company. I checked my watch. 11:22, right on schedule. Occasional headlights appeared in my rearview mirror, far behind on the straight stretches, only to disappear around bends. Probably other company trucks making the same run. The laminated card sat on the passenger seat where I'd tossed it, its white surface catching the green glow from the dashboard instruments. I'd needed this job badly after getting fired from Transcontinental for missing deliveries during my mother's final weeks. The bills from her hospice care had wiped out my savings. When the Northern Reach listing appeared with its promised wages, I'd applied immediately, barely reading the job description. The highway curved sharply to the right. I downshifted, easing off the accelerator as the truck's weight shifted. As I rounded the bend, my headlights swept across the road ahead. I hit the brakes instinctively. Something stood in the middle of my lane, directly in the beams. My fingers tightened around the wheel as the distance closed between us. The truck's air brakes hissed as we slowed. The first rule flashed in my mind. Human, male, standing perfectly still in my lane, facing the oncoming truck. Rule 1. If you see a man in the road, do not stop. My boot hovered between the brake and accelerator pedals. A decision point. My headlights caught him square, a man standing dead center in my lane. The double beam hit his figure like a spotlight against the pitch black. Brown jacket, jeans, just standing there, both arms hanging straight at his sides. I stomped the brake pedal, the air brakes hissing as 18 wheels fought momentum. The speedometer needle swung counterclockwise, 60 down to 45, then 30, the cargo shifting behind me with a muffled thud. My palms left sweat prints on the wheel. The man didn't move, didn't raise his arms, didn't step aside, just stood facing my truck, now 50 yards away and closing. Something was wrong with how he stood. Too still. Like a roadside marker someone had dressed in clothes. I glanced at the passenger seat where I'd tossed that stupid laminated card. The dashboard glow caught its edge. 25 yards now. Close enough to see he wore a flannel shirt under that jacket. Work boots. A normal guy who should be diving for the shoulder, not staring down 80,000 pounds of truck and cargo. My foot hovered between brake and gas. A twist of the wheel would put me in the opposite lane. Empty road in both directions. No headlights behind me, none approaching. I downshifted, eased onto the accelerator and pulled left. The Peterbilt's engine growled as I steered around him, keeping my eyes fixed on the yellow center line. As I passed, I caught him in my peripheral vision. He turned his head, tracking the cab. No wave, no cry for help, no attempt to flag me down. Just that slow head turn, like a security camera pivoting. The side mirror showed him still standing there as I accelerated, growing smaller in the rectangle of glass, a lone figure swallowed by darkness as I rounded the next bend. My knuckles ached from gripping the wheel. I flexed my fingers one by one, trying to ease the tension. "Company hazing," I said to the empty cab. "Some local guy they pay to stand there and scare new drivers." The words sounded hollow against the engine noise and the rattle of the cab. If it was a prank, they'd gone to considerable trouble, a man standing miles from anywhere in the middle of the night. I checked the mile marker as it flashed past, 127. I'd remember that at least. Maybe ask about it when I reached the mining camp. The rest of the drive passed without incident. I kept the radio tuned to the faint station I'd found earlier, turning it up whenever the signal strengthened. The classic rock and occasional bursts of static felt like company after what I'd seen. The forest gave way to scrubland around 3 in the morning. I followed the directions on my manifest, turning onto a packed gravel road that led to the Nighthawk mining complex, a collection of prefab buildings, equipment sheds, and dormitories carved out of the wilderness. Security waved me through a chain-link gate topped with barbed wire. A night supervisor directed me to the loading zone, clipboard in hand. "Miller, Northern Reach?" he asked, checking his sheet. "That's right." I cut the engine. The sudden silence felt physical after hours of road noise. "Thought you'd be David." He squinted at his clipboard. "He usually runs this route." "First time up here." I climbed down from the cab, my back stiff from the long haul. "James Miller, Carl Weathers." The supervisor shook my hand, his calloused palm rough against mine. "You're a bit early. We'll get your cargo unloaded, but the return shipment won't be ready till 1600. I nodded, doing the mental calculation. Gives me time to sleep. "Driver's quarters are in Building 3. He pointed to a long single-story structure behind the main processing facility. "Showers, bunks, canteen. Help yourself." 2 workers began unloading my trailer while I completed the delivery paperwork. The eastern sky had lightened to deep blue by the time I shouldered my overnight bag and headed for the dormitory. The driver's quarters smelled of industrial cleaner and burnt coffee. 4 bunks lined each wall of a narrow room, most empty. I claimed one near the door, pulled off my boots, and stretched out on the thin mattress without bothering to undress. My mind kept returning to the figure on the highway. I'd driven 16 years, logged over 1,000,000 miles across every province. I'd seen plenty of strange things, drunks, animals, debris, but never someone just standing there, making no attempt to move or signal. Sleep came in fragments, broken by the sounds of machinery starting up outside and workers changing shifts. Each time I drifted off, I saw that figure again, turning his head as I passed. I woke fully around noon, gritty-eyed and disoriented. The bunk room remained empty except for a heavy-set driver snoring in the far corner. I grabbed my toiletry kit and found the showers. The hot water helped clear my head. Probably a stranded motorist, I reasoned, though I hadn't seen any vehicle. Or a worker from a nearby site, though there wasn't much besides wilderness for miles. The canteen offered a self-serve lunch of sandwiches and coffee. I ate mechanically, studying a wall map of the mining operation while trying to convince myself I'd imagined the oddness of the encounter. At 4 in the afternoon, I checked out my return cargo. Sealed containers of processed ore samples and equipment parts heading back to the main depot. By 1:15, I'd secured the load and completed my pre-departure checks. Heading out? Carl appeared at my elbow as I closed the trailer doors. "Yeah, should hit the depot around midnight if the road stays clear." He nodded, glancing at the sky. "Weather's holding. You be careful out there, though." Something in his tone made me pause. "Any particular reason?" Carl shrugged, his expression neutral. "Night driving's always tricky up here. Animals, weather changes. You know how it is." I waited, wondering if he might mention something about figures standing in the road, but he just initialed my paperwork and walked away. By 5, I was back on Highway 63, heading south toward the depot. The sun hung low behind the trees, casting long shadows across the pavement. I set the cruise control and settled in for the return journey, trying to focus on the road and not what might be waiting at mile marker 127. I woke to the sound of boots on metal stairs and men shouting outside the bunkhouse window. The thin mattress had left a kink in my neck. My watch read 3:27 in the afternoon, later than I'd planned to sleep. The shouting continued as I laced my boots. Not the routine calls of shift workers, but the clipped, urgent tone of something wrong. I splashed water on my face from the sink, ran wet fingers through my hair, and stepped outside. 3 pickup trucks with flashing amber light bars idled in the yard. A cluster of workers in high-visibility vests stood by the security hut, radio handsets squawking between them. Carl Weathers paced the edge of the group, marking something on a clipboard. "What happened?" I asked a woman walking past with a rolled-up map. "Driver didn't make his delivery." She kept moving, her voice flat with the practiced tone of someone trained not to spread rumors. My stomach tightened. I crossed to where Carl stood. "Miller." He nodded, recognizing me from the night before. "Get some rest?" "Enough. What's going on?" He squinted toward the tree line where the access road disappeared into forest. "One of our regular drivers should have arrived at 0500 this morning. Never showed." "Breakdown?" "No." Carl scratched the stubble under his jaw. He radioed base at 1217, said he was stopping to help someone on the road. The memory of the figure standing in my lane flashed across my mind. Where? Mile marker 127. The same spot, exactly where I'd seen the man last night. "We sent out the site trucks an hour ago," Carl continued. "Found his rig parked on the shoulder. Engine running. Driver's door open." "And the driver?" Carl's mouth tightened. "Gone. No sign of him or whoever he stopped for." He flipped a page on his clipboard. "Dave Miller. You know him?" I shook my head. "Same company, though?" "Northern Reach, yeah. Been running this route for 3 years." The men by the security hut climbed into 2 of the pickups, which pulled away toward the main road, light bars still flashing. Carl walked with me toward the canteen. "Coffee?" he offered. I nodded, throat too dry to answer. The canteen was empty except for a cook prepping dinner. Carl poured 2 mugs from an industrial-sized pot, handed me one, and settled into a metal chair that creaked under his weight. "Not the first time," he said, voice lowered though no one was near enough to hear. "Third driver in 2 months, all the same stretch of highway, all at night." I wrapped my hands around the mug. "All Northern Reach drivers?" "2 of them, one from Continental Shipping." He took a long drink. "State police ran a full search after the second one. Found nothing." "What about cameras? Traffic monitoring? This far north?" Carl gave a short laugh. "Nothing but wildlife cameras, and those are aimed at the tree line." I stared into my coffee, thinking about the laminated card with its 4 rules. The first one had saved me. Do not stop. Dave's mug was still warm when they found the truck, Carl added. 20 minutes max since he'd been drinking from it. Personal gear untouched in the sleeper. Wallet, phone, everything. "Missing persons?" "State police are treating it that way, but..." His words trailed off. "But what?" Carl rubbed a calloused hand across his face. "These roads, things happen out here that don't make sense." I wanted to ask more, but the radio on his belt crackled. He answered, listened, then stood. "They've called off the search until morning. No tracks leading from the highway." After he left, I sat alone with my cooling coffee. The mining camp suddenly felt very far from anything familiar. Dave Miller had stopped his truck at the exact mile marker where I'd passed the figure in the road. If I'd followed my instinct to stop, would I be the missing driver now? I'd delivered to remote locations for 16 years, crossed mountains and blizzards, driven across deserts with 300 miles between gas stations. Nothing had prepared me for what Carl had described, or for what I'd seen. Back in the quiet of the bunkhouse, I pulled out my phone. No signal, as expected. I walked to the operations building where a landline connected to the outside world. "Northern Reach Logistics," Robert's gruff voice answered on the 3rd ring. "This is James Miller. I'm at Nighthawk Mining." A pause, then. "You're scheduled to head back tonight. Did you hear about David Miller?" I asked. A long silence filled the line. I heard papers shuffling, then Robert sighed. A soft exhale that told me more than words could have. "When?" "Last night. Mile marker 127. They found his truck abandoned." Another pause. "Your return cargo will be loaded by 1800. Replacement driver arrives tomorrow." The casual tone made my skin crawl. "That's it? One of your drivers is missing. Nothing we can do about it now." His voice remained level. "You heading back on schedule?" My hand tightened on the receiver. "Yes." "Good." I heard him tap something against his desk. A pen, maybe, or his lighter. "The rules exist for good reasons, Miller. Take them seriously from now on." The line went dead before I could respond. I spent the next hour in the canteen, pushing food around my plate without appetite. Outside, the early sunset painted the mining complex in orange light that gradually faded to purple. The wall clock read 5:43 when Carl appeared at my table. "Your trailer's loaded. Paperwork's at the dispatch office." I nodded my thanks. "Weather report says clear skies," he added, hovering by my table. "Should be an easy drive." We both knew weather wasn't what concerned me. At the dispatch office, I signed for my cargo, replacement parts and metal drums marked with hazard labels. The shipping clerk handed me a sealed envelope. "Dave's personal effects," she explained, "for his family." The envelope weighed almost nothing. A wallet, watch, and wedding ring, according to the inventory list. I tucked it carefully into my jacket pocket. At 6:25, I pulled through the security gate, headlights cutting through the gathering darkness. The gravel access road bumped under my wheels for 8 miles before I reached Highway 63. I turned south, 240 miles back to the depot. My hands were steady on the wheel, but a cold sweat gathered at the small of my back. The white card sat on the dash now, its 4 rules visible in the glow of the instruments. I'd memorized them all. The forest pressed close on both sides of the highway, dense and watchful. For the first hour, I kept the radio tuned to static, preferring the white noise to silence. My headlights occasionally caught reflective eyes in the underbrush, animals watching the truck pass. Mile marker 150, 140. Each sign brought me closer to the spot where Dave Miller had vanished. I rehearsed what I would do if I saw the figure again. Keep driving, no matter what, no matter who it appeared to be. The rules were clear, and now I understood their purpose. The dashboard clock read 10:17 when I spotted mile marker 128. 1 more mile. My grip on the steering wheel tightened until my knuckles ached. The headlights swept around a curve, and mile marker 127 appeared in their beams. I held my breath as the truck approached the exact spot where Dave Miller's journey had ended. I passed mile marker 127 without incident. No figure in the road, no vehicle on the shoulder. Nothing to mark the spot where Dave Miller had vanished except the same scrubby pines and patchy asphalt that stretched for miles in either direction. The knot in my shoulders loosened a fraction. I rolled my head side to side, feeling the tendons crack. My watch read 10:22, nearly 200 miles to go. The highway remained empty, a black ribbon cutting through darker forest. Every few miles, my headlights caught the green, reflective squares of mile markers counting down. 126, 125, 124. Each one meant distance between me and whatever had happened to Dave. I tuned the radio, searching for anything besides static. Found a faint signal broadcasting hockey scores and left it on just to hear another human voice. The commentator faded in and out mid-sentence, signal strength waxing and waning with the terrain. Third period now, Oilers trailing by 2 with 8 minutes remaining. Static swallowed the rest. I adjusted the volume, more for company than information. The trees pressed closer to the roadside as the highway narrowed through a stretch of old-growth forest. Branches formed a tunnel overhead, blocking what little moonlight filtered through the clouds. My headlights created the only visible world, 100 feet of pavement ahead, then darkness. At mile marker 98, I passed a pull-off area with a rusted trash barrel, the kind of spot where travelers might stretch their legs or eat a quick meal from a cooler. Tonight it looked like a perfect place for something to wade out of sight. I kept my speed steady at 65, Not rushing, not dawdling, just moving steadily south toward the depot, toward normal roads with other vehicles and cell service and roadside diners where the coffee tasted terrible, but human voices filled the air. The radio sputtered back to life. Weather front moving in from the northwest, bringing cold temperatures and possible snow flurries by morning. I checked the sky through the windshield. Stars winked between cloud patches. No snowfall yet, but this far north, weather changed quickly. The dashboard clock read 11:48 when I spotted something odd ahead. My headlights swept across a reflective surface at an unusual angle. As I drew closer, the shape resolved into a yellow diamond-shaped sign, hanging completely upside down. I blinked, certain I'd misperceived. The sign should have been displaying a curve warning, black arrow on yellow background. Instead, the arrow pointed up toward the sky, the metal panel attached to its post but flipped 180 degrees. Rule 2 from the laminated card flashed through my mind. If you see an upside-down road sign, do not stop. The curve warning preceded a sharp bend in the highway, a potentially dangerous turn for anyone driving too fast, especially in the dark. The sign served a purpose, keeping drivers safe. My foot hovered over the brake pedal. A few minutes' work would fix it. Climb up, rotate the panel, tighten the bolts. Other drivers would need that warning. Dave Miller's abandoned truck appeared in my mind. Engine running, door open, coffee mug still warm, gone. I kept my foot on the accelerator and drove past the sign without slowing. In my side mirror, the reflective yellow surface caught my taillights, glinting like an eye watching my departure. I returned my attention to the road ahead, took the curve at 50, and continued south. Still, something felt wrong about leaving the sign that way. What if the next driver missed the curve? What if someone who didn't know the rules stopped to fix it? I gripped the wheel tighter and pressed on. Mile marker 84 came and went, then 79. The forest began to thin, patches of scrubland appearing between stands of pine. Every few minutes I checked my mirrors. The highway remained empty behind me. No headlights, no movement, just the twin red glow of my taillights reflecting off the center line. My radio picked up a stronger signal now, a late-night talk show where callers discussed conspiracy theories with a host who sounded half asleep. I turned it up, letting the voices fill the cab. At 1:17 in the morning, I passed a highway maintenance yard, chain-link fence surrounding a cluster of snowplows and trucks. All dark at this hour, a place to report the upside-down sign if only someone had been working. The depot appeared at 3:22 in the morning, 3 prefab buildings arranged around a gravel lot just as I'd left them 4 days earlier. The middle building showed a single lit window, Robert's office. I parked the Peterbilt in berth 6 and completed my post-trip inspection by flashlight. Engine temperature normal, tire pressure consistent, fuel level at quarter tank. I noted each detail in my log with mechanical precision, stretching the routine to calm my nerves. When I couldn't delay any longer, I gathered my paperwork and the sealed envelope containing Dave Miller's effects. The gravel crunched under my boots as I crossed to the office building. Robert sat behind the counter, exactly as before. Same flannel shirt with rolled sleeves, same thermos at his elbow, different cigarette burning in the ashtray. "Cargo secure?" he asked without looking up from his logbook. "Yes." I placed my paperwork in the metal tray. Left everything locked in the trailer as instructed. He nodded, made a notation. "Next run scheduled for 1600 hours today, same route." My stomach tightened. "About that, there's an upside-down road sign about 80 miles north of here. Curve warning. Hanging wrong way up." Robert's pen stopped moving. He looked at me properly for the first time. "You didn't stop." "No." I placed the envelope with Dave's belongings on the counter. "But someone should fix it before the next driver heads up." He set down his pen, took the envelope and opened his desk drawer. The envelope disappeared inside. The drawer closed with a soft click. Maintenance will check it, he said. When? Today. He returned to his logbook. Get some sleep. 1,600 hours. I stood there, waiting for more. An explanation, a comment about Dave. Anything. Robert didn't look up again. Just kept writing in his book, the cigarette burning down between his fingers. I turned and left, walking to my truck where I'd sleep rather than use the driver's quarters. The clock on the dashboard read 3:49 when I crawled into the sleeper berth and pulled a blanket over myself, fully dressed except for my boots. Sleep came in fragments. 15 minutes here, 20 there. Dreams of upside-down signs and empty trucks with doors hanging open. Coffee mugs still warm, but no driver to be found. At 15:30 that afternoon, I woke fully, stiff and disoriented. Sunlight slanted through the cab windows. I pulled on my boots and walked to the canteen for coffee and whatever passed for lunch. 2 other drivers sat at separate tables, both focused on their food. Neither looked up when I entered. I filled a styrofoam cup with coffee that smelled like it had been sitting since morning, grabbed a wrapped sandwich from the cooler, and found a seat near the window. Outside, workers loaded my trailer for the next run. The same mining camp, the same highway, the same upside-down sign waiting 80 miles north. Except when I reached that stretch of road at 1923 that evening, the sign hung properly. Yellow diamond, black arrow pointing right to indicate the curve ahead, mounted correctly on its metal post. I slowed slightly, studying it as I passed. The reflective surface caught my headlights normally. No indication it had ever been wrong. No maintenance vehicles had passed me on the highway, no crews working on the roadside. The location, 80 miles from the nearest town, 40 from the maintenance yard, made it nearly impossible for anyone to reach it and repair it in the 12 hours since I'd reported it. Yet there it was, fixed, corrected, normal. I drove on, watching my mirrors more carefully than before. Rule 2 had saved me from whatever had happened to Dave Miller, but something else nagged at me now. The question of who or what had fixed that sign after I'd safely passed, and whether they'd be waiting for me again tonight. I'd been on the road for 3 hours and 42 minutes. The Peterbilt hummed steadily at 62 miles per hour, eating up Highway 63 in rhythmic chunks marked by the faint vibration where sections of pavement met. My thermos sat wedged between the seat and console, coffee gone tepid 2 hours back. The dashboard clock read 10:17. Clouds had moved in since sunset, blocking whatever moonlight might have helped define the landscape beyond my headlights. Just me, 2 lanes of asphalt, and wall of spruce on either side. I'd seen no other vehicles since leaving the depot. The radio offered nothing but static, which I'd left on low. White noise better than complete silence. My eyes burned from watching the hypnotic pulse of the center line reflectors. Headlights appeared ahead, growing from pinpricks to full beams. The first oncoming traffic of the night. I noted it in the mental log I'd been keeping since my last run. Timestamp, vehicle, location. The kind of information that might matter later, though I couldn't say why. The vehicle approached quickly. Sedan, not truck, moving faster than the posted limit. As it drew closer, I made out its color, deep blue, almost navy. The kind of blue that looks black until light hits it right. We passed each other at mile marker 153, nothing remarkable about the car itself, just a mid-sized sedan with Alberta plates. I watched it shrink in my mirrors until the red taillights disappeared around a bend. I rolled my shoulders to loosen the knot forming between my shoulder blades. 20 minutes until I'd reached the spot where I'd seen the upside-down sign. Maybe 40 until mile marker 127 where Dave Miller had vanished. The laminated card rested on my dashboard now, rules facing up, a talisman of sorts. My odometer ticked steadily upward. Mile marker 142 slid past, then 141. I crossed a low bridge spanning a nameless creek, metal expansion joints thumping under my tires. Movement in my mirrors caught my attention. Headlights behind me, approaching fast. Unusual on this empty stretch. especially at this hour. The vehicle closed the distance rapidly, appearing over bright in the darkness. I held steady in my lane as the vehicle gained on me. Through the mirrors, I made out its shape. Sedan, not truck. The same deep blue as the car that had passed me 23 minutes earlier, heading the opposite direction. My hand moved to the dashboard, fingers finding the laminated card. Rule 3. If you see the same car twice, take the opposite turn it did. The sedan swung into the passing lane and accelerated alongside my trailer. I caught only glimpses through my mirrors. Blue paint, standard wheels. Nothing distinctive except its presence here, now, heading the same direction I was after passing me southbound less than half an hour ago. It pulled even with my cab, then surged forward, completing the pass. No driver visible through the tinted windows, just a blue sedan that logistically couldn't be here. I watched its taillights pull away, growing smaller until they disappeared around a curve ahead. My right hand gripped the wheel while my left pressed against the laminated card, as if physical contact with the rules might offer protection. 8 miles ahead lay the junction where Highway 63 split. Left fork continued to Nighthawk Mining. Right fork led to Coldwater Basin, a secondary site I'd never visited. The manifest specified Nighthawk, same as my previous runs. The blue sedan would reach the junction before me. Which way would it turn? I maintained my speed, neither gaining nor losing ground. The gap between us stayed consistent. Every curve revealed its taillights still ahead, leading me northward. My route, my destination. 10:37. The junction appeared in my headlights, reflective signs marking the split, left toward Nighthawk, right toward Coldwater. The sedan's brake lights flashed once as it slowed, then its left turn signal blinked 3 times before it veered onto the Nighthawk fork. I slowed the Peterbilt, downshifting as the junction approached. The rule burned in my mind: take the opposite turn. My truck was scheduled at Nighthawk. The cargo manifest listed specific delivery instructions. Paperwork waited for my signature. Taking the right fork meant delays, explanations, probably a call to dispatch. Yet Dave Miller had followed the rules until he didn't. Until he stopped for someone on the road at mile marker 127. I flipped my right turn signal on and swung wide to make the turn onto the Coldwater Road. The Peterbilt's headlights swept across dense underbrush as the road narrowed immediately after the junction. The pavement here showed cracks where frost had worked between seams, forcing them apart over years of seasonal expansion. My truck's suspension transmitted every imperfection in the road surface. This fork clearly received less maintenance than the main route to Nighthawk. Trees pressed closer to the shoulder, branches occasionally scraping against the top of my trailer. I checked my watch, 10:44. Nighthawk would be expecting me around midnight. The Coldwater route would add at least an hour, maybe more, given the road conditions. I'd need to radio ahead once I got close enough for transmission. The forest grew denser along this stretch. My headlights created a tunnel effect, high beams barely penetrating the wall of vegetation on either side. No mile markers here, just occasional reflective posts marking the shoulder. 11:23. The road curved, then straightened, revealing a clearing ahead where the trees pulled back from both shoulders. As I approached, my lights swept across something on the right side, a vehicle parked at an odd angle, half on the shoulder, half in the ditch. I slowed but didn't stop, studying it as I passed. A truck, old model Kenworth, red cab dulled to rust brown, sitting low on blown tires. Vegetation had grown up around the wheel wells. The windshield showed a spiderweb crack across the driver's side. No plates visible. Not recent. Not days or weeks abandoned, but years. My headlights lingered on it as I rolled past, catching details. A faded company logo on the door, mostly obscured by rust, but still showing the outline of a mountain peak. The trailer remained hitched, its white surface turned gray-green with mildew and algae. I made a mental note of its position, approximately 15 miles from the junction on the Coldwater Road. Another data point for my growing mental file of highway anomalies. The radio crackled suddenly, startling me. Through heavy static, I caught fragments of voices, not broadcast but transmission chatter. I adjusted the dial, trying to clarify the signal. Delivery expected, confirmed time of. The mining camp reaching out, wondering about my arrival. I picked up the handset. Northern Reach Transport responding to Nighthawk. This is Miller, taking alternate route via Coldwater. Delayed approximately 1 hour over. Static answered me then. Copy that. Proceed to loading dock 3 when the transmission faded. I replaced the handset and focused on the road, maintaining 45 miles per hour where the surface allowed. My watch showed 11:49 when the trees finally thinned and the Coldwater mining facility appeared ahead, smaller than Nighthawk, with only 2 main buildings and a processing plant behind chain-link fencing. A single guard stood at the gate, flashlight beam tracking my approach. I stopped at the checkpoint and lowered my window. Northern Reach delivery, I said, handing over my manifest. Scheduled for Nighthawk but had to divert. The guard, heavy-set man with a graying beard, scanned the paperwork. Nothing on the schedule for us tonight. He examined the manifest more closely. These parts are all tagged for Nighthawk equipment. I know, had to take the Coldwater route due to road conditions. Need to use your radio to contact Nighthawk. He nodded slowly, handed back my paperwork. Follow access road to admin building. Someone there can help you reach Nighthawk dispatch. I thanked him and drove through the gate, following the gravel road to a prefab structure with lights showing in the windows. A sign marked it as Administration and Operations. I parked in the empty lot and killed the engine. Inside, a woman with short gray hair looked up from a computer terminal. Her badge identified her as Martinez M., Operations Manager. Miller, Northern Reach, I said, approaching her desk. Need to radio Nighthawk. Had to divert from the main highway. She gestured toward a radio setup on a side table. Channel 3 for Nighthawk operations. Her eyes narrowed slightly. What made you divert? Weather's clear. I hesitated. Saw a vehicle behaving erratically on the main route. Decided to take the alternate for safety. Not exactly a lie, but not the whole truth either. Blue sedan? She asked, her tone shifting. My hand froze on the radio dial. You've seen it? Martinez's mouth tightened. 3 weeks ago. Passed me twice on a straight stretch of road. No way to turn around between sightings. She studied my face. You follow the rules? Took the opposite turn, I confirmed. She nodded once, returned to her computer. Smart. Others haven't. I wanted to ask more, but her closed expression discouraged further conversation. Instead, I used the radio to contact Nighthawk, explaining my situation and estimated arrival time. The night supervisor at Nighthawk sounded annoyed, but acknowledged the message. I'd arrive around 1:30 in the morning, 90 minutes behind schedule. After completing the call, I turned back to Martinez, who was watching me with a calculating expression. The abandoned truck about 15 miles back, I said. How long has it been there? That old Kenworth? She leaned back in her chair. Since before I started here, 8 years at least. Company ever try to recover it? No company left to recover it. Continental Shipping went under in 2014. She tapped her keyboard a few times. Driver reported missing October 12, 2014. Leonard Greaves, 38. State police investigation found nothing. My throat felt dry. Any other vehicles abandoned along these roads? Her eyes met mine directly. You asking as a general inquiry, or because you've seen others? Just curious. Martinez looked back at her screen. You should head out if you want to make Nighthawk by 1:30. Road gets narrower past Coldwater. I thanked her and left, her non-answer telling me more than words could have. The cab felt colder when I climbed back in. I checked my watch, 12:14, and started the engine. The guard waved me through the exit gate without stopping me. Back on the narrow road heading northeast, trees crowding close to the pavement, I found myself scanning the forest edge more carefully than before. My headlights caught nothing but underbrush and tree trunks. No vehicles, no movement, no blue sedan waiting to make another impossible appearance. I reached Nighthawk Mining at 1:27 in the morning. The night supervisor met me at the loading dock with obvious irritation. "Cargo's time-sensitive, Miller. Your company guaranteed midnight delivery." "Had to take an alternate route," I explained, handing over the manifest for his signature. "Through Coldwater? That adds 58 minutes minimum. Ran into some trouble on the main highway." He grunted, scribbling his signature. What kind of trouble keeps a professional driver from using the primary route? I considered how to answer. Saw something that didn't look right. Decided to play it safe. "Blue car?" He didn't look up from the paperwork. My skin prickled. "You've seen it too?" "Not me. Previous supervisor." He handed back my clipboard. Found his pickup wrapped around a tree 3 miles from the Coldwater Junction. Said he was following a blue sedan that kept appearing in his mirrors. When was this? 2 months ago. He signaled to the dock workers to begin unloading. They found his body at least, more than they can say for some. We stood in silence as the workers emptied my trailer. When they finished, the supervisor handed me a new manifest for return cargo, mining samples in sealed containers, replacement parts, supply requisitions. "You heading back tonight?" he asked as workers loaded the outbound shipment. "That's the schedule." He nodded, eyes tracking the loading process. "Which route?" "Coldwater," I said without hesitation. "Even if it takes longer. Smart." He handed me a thermos. "Fresh coffee. You'll need it." I thanked him and climbed back into my cab as they finished securing the load. My watch read 2:43 in the morning. The depot was 4 hours away via the Coldwater route, more than 5 with the road conditions. As I pulled away from the loading dock, the supervisor raised his hand in a gesture that wasn't quite a wave, more an acknowledgement between people who understood something unspoken. The return journey stretched before me, dark road, narrower than the main highway, with that abandoned Kenworth marking the halfway point like a roadside memorial. No blue sedan would trouble me on this route tonight, but the knowledge that others had encountered it, and not all had survived, sat heavy in my stomach. I sipped the fresh coffee and settled in for the long drive back, the laminated card with its 4 rules propped against my dashboard. Rules that had seemed like nonsense days ago now felt like a lifeline, the only protection against whatever waited on Highway 63 after dark. I reached the junction at 3:17 in the morning. The signs for Highway 63 gleamed in my headlights, one pointing south toward the depot, the other continuing the Coldwater route northeast. I took the southern fork, my trailer shifting slightly as the tires crossed uneven pavement. The trees closed in immediately. Taller, older growth than what lined the Coldwater road. Black spruce and lodgepole pine pressed against both shoulders, creating walls of vegetation that swallowed my headlights 20 yards ahead. The forest felt denser here, as if the trees had crept closer to the pavement while I'd been gone. My watch showed 3:29, 190 miles to the depot. The thermos from Nighthawk sat empty in the cup holder. I rolled my shoulders and adjusted my position, fighting the stiffness that came from 8 straight hours behind the wheel. Mile marker 72 slid past, meaning I'd successfully bypassed the section of highway where Dave Miller had vanished. The thought brought little comfort. Rules had kept me safe so far, but each encounter felt like a test. First, the man in the road, then the upside-down sign, then the blue sedan appearing twice. 3 rules triggered, 1 remaining. The radio produced nothing but static now. I turned it off, preferring the rumble of tires and the steady thrum of the diesel engine to the white noise. The silence felt more honest somehow. At mile marker 58, the road dipped through a shallow valley where fog had gathered in patchy pools. My headlights carved through the mist, creating ghostly shapes that dissipated as the truck passed. The temperature gauge on my dashboard had dropped 2 degrees since entering this stretch. The clock read 3:51 when I noticed the first anomaly, a momentary flicker in my headlights. Nothing dramatic, just a quarter-second dimming as if something had partially interrupted the power flow. I tapped the steering wheel-mounted switch, cycling the high beams off and on. They functioned normally, probably nothing. Older trucks sometimes had electrical gremlins, especially on cold nights. Still, I found myself scanning the gauges more frequently, alert for any indication of system failure. The second flicker came 6 minutes later. Longer this time, maybe half a second. The dashboard lights dimmed in sync with the headlights. I pressed my foot slightly harder on the accelerator, pushing the Peterbilt to 68 miles per hour. Whatever electrical issue had developed, I wanted maximum distance between me and this section of forest before it worsened. Mile marker 43 passed on my right. The fog had thickened, not quite dense enough to require fog lights, but substantial enough to diffuse my headlights, creating a glowing bubble around the truck. Through this haze, the trees appeared as dark sentinels, their upper branches lost in blackness above the reach of my lights. The third flicker lasted almost 2 seconds, long enough for the darkness to rush in around me before the lights stabilized again. This time, the engine stuttered briefly, a fuel line issue maybe, or something in the electrical system affecting the fuel pump. I downshifted, letting the engine's compression help maintain speed while reducing demand on the fuel system. My eyes flicked between the road ahead and the dashboard gauges. Temperature normal, oil pressure steady, battery charge fluctuating slightly but within acceptable range. The sound reached me at 4:17 exactly. Laughter, high-pitched and musical, children's voices. I jerked upright in my seat, hand automatically reaching for the volume control before remembering I'd turned the radio off 26 minutes earlier. The laughter came again, louder this time, not from my speakers but from somewhere in the darkness beyond my headlights. Rule 4 slammed into my consciousness. If you hear a child's laughter, stop immediately and turn off your lights. My foot moved to the brake pedal without conscious decision. The air brakes hissed as the truck decelerated, cargo shifting behind me. The laughter continued, seeming to move alongside the truck, keeping pace despite my slowing. Not a single child, but several voices overlapping in that distinctive way of playground noise. I guided the Peterbilt onto the shoulder, feeling the right tires rumble over the edgeline. The laughter circled around to the front, then both sides simultaneously. Impossible angles of sound. The voices didn't echo as they should in dense forest. They projected clearly, as if no obstacles stood between them and my ears. The truck rolled to a complete stop at mile marker 39. My hands gripped the wheel as I fought every instinct screaming at me to keep moving, to put distance between myself and those voices. But the rule had been clear, had saved me 3 times already. I reached for the headlight switch, hesitated for 1 heartbeat, then twisted it to the off position. Darkness flooded the cab, complete overwhelming black that made my eyes water as they strained to adjust. The laughter stopped abruptly, leaving only the tick of the cooling engine and my own breathing. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. I counted silently, tracking time while my vision adjusted. After 37 seconds, shapes began to separate from the darkness. The outline of my hands on the wheel, the faint green glow of instrument panel indicators. Beyond the windshield, absolutely nothing. No stars, no moon, no distant lights. The fog and forest created a perfect black box around the truck. The laughter resumed at what I estimated as 4:22. Closer now, just outside the cab. Multiple voices. I counted at least 5 distinct tones, ranging from what sounded like a toddler's giggle to an older child's more controlled laugh. Something brushed against the driver's side door. A soft scraping sound, like small fingers trailing along the metal. I held myself perfectly still, focusing on maintaining even breaths. The temperature inside the cab had dropped noticeably, cold enough that I could see my breath forming pale clouds in the dim glow of the instruments. A tap on the window by my left ear, light at first, then more insistent. Tap, 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 rhythmic, deliberate, testing. I kept my eyes fixed straight ahead, not turning toward the sound. The tapping continued for 23 seconds before stopping. Silence again, broken only by a faint whispering, too quiet to make out words. The whispers moved across the front of the truck, multiple voices murmuring in what might have been conversation. Small shapes blocked the minimal ambient light filtering through the windshield. I couldn't make out details, just vague outlines that seemed roughly child-sized but somehow wrong in their proportions. Arms too long, heads slightly misshapen. I closed my eyes. Better not to see, better not to know. The temperature continued to drop. My fingers ached with cold despite the gloves I wore. Frost patterns formed on the inside of the windows, crackling as they spread across the glass. The whispering changed to singing. No recognizable melody, just lilting, wordless sounds that raised the hair on the back of my neck. Something heavier moved across the hood. Metal creaked under the weight. The singing stopped, replaced by that laughter again, now containing a note I hadn't detected before, a hungry edge beneath the childish tones. Tap, tap, tap on the windshield directly in front of my face. I flinched but kept my eyes closed, hands locked on the wheel as if it might anchor me against whatever waited outside. "Driver," a voice whispered, close enough that it seemed to come from inside the cab. "We're cold. Let us in." The voice sounded like a child of perhaps 8 years, but with a strange layered quality, as if multiple throats produced the same words simultaneously. I didn't respond, didn't move. The rule said nothing about speaking to them. "We saw the other one," the voice continued. "He opened his door, showed us his lights. Dave Miller. They were talking about Dave. Such pretty lights he showed us," another voice added from the passenger side. "Such warm lights." My chest tightened. I focused on my breathing, counting each inhale and exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. The whispers continued, sometimes addressing me directly, sometimes conversing with each other in a language that contained no recognizable words. Tapping resumed on all windows simultaneously, dozens of small impacts creating a percussion that matched the rhythm of my heartbeat. The truck rocked slightly as if pushed by multiple hands. Cold air seeped through every seam in the cab, bringing with it a smell like wet soil and something metallic. I lost track of time. My watch had stopped at 4:27, the digital display frozen. The green glow from the instrument panel provided the only reference point in the darkness. I concentrated on that glow, using it to remind myself that morning would eventually come, that this darkness, however absolute it seemed, was temporary. The voices grew more insistent as time passed. More hands pressed against the glass, the metal, searching for ways inside. The laughter took on a frustrated edge. The temperature dropped until my breath formed ice crystals in my beard. Sometime later, hours maybe, or minutes stretched by fear, the tapping slowed. The whispers faded. The weight lifted from the hood. The cold remained, but the presence outside the truck withdrew inch by inch, like a tide receding. I kept my eyes closed, counting breaths until the silence had lasted long enough that I believed they might truly be gone. Then I waited longer still. The first hint of gray light filtered through my eyelids at what must have been dawn. I opened my eyes to find frost covering every interior surface of the cab. The windows had become opaque sheets of ice. Patterns swirled into them like fingerprints left by searching hands. My watch read 4:27 still, but the growing light outside confirmed morning had arrived. I flexed my stiff fingers, peeling them from the steering wheel where cold had nearly frozen them in place. My joints cracked as I reached for the headlight switch and turned it to the on position. Nothing happened. The electrical system remained dead, unresponsive. I tried the ignition. The starter clicked weakly once, then nothing. battery drained completely, though it had shown full charge before the encounter. Outside, enough light penetrated the frosted windows to reveal the highway. I used my sleeve to clear a viewing port in the windshield ice. The road stretched empty in both directions, no other vehicles, no movement in the tree line, but the truck itself had changed. Muddy handprints covered every visible surface, hundreds of them, in sizes ranging from infant small to nearly adult, but with fingers too long, too thin. They marked the doors, the hood, the windshield. Some had pressed hard enough to dent the metal. I tried the ignition again. This time the engine coughed once, twice, then caught with a roar that sounded unnaturally loud after the night silence. The headlights flickered on, illuminating nothing but empty highway in the gray dawn. I put the truck in gear and pulled back onto the pavement, moving south toward the depot, toward civilization. The handprints remained visible in my mirrors until road dust and morning dew gradually obscured them. I drove without stopping, without speaking into the radio that had come back to life, broadcasting morning farm reports and weather forecasts as if nothing had happened. Mile markers counted down, 38, 37, 36, each one placing distance between me and whatever had surrounded my truck in the darkness. The depot appeared at 7:12, its prefab buildings looking absurdly normal in the morning light. I parked the Peterbilt in berth 6 and sat motionless for several minutes, gathering the energy to step outside. When I finally opened the door, I half expected small hands to grab at me, but there was only the gravel lot and the smell of someone cooking breakfast in the driver's quarters. Robert sat at the dispatch counter, logging manifests. He looked up as I entered, his eyes taking in my frost-reddened face and the tremor in my hands. "Cargo secure?" he asked, same as always. "Yes." My voice sounded rusty, unused. He nodded, made a notation. "Next run's tomorrow. Oh, 600. Nighthawk again." I placed the manifest and my company ID on the counter. I quit. Robert's pen stopped moving. He looked at me properly for the first time since I'd started working there. "Which one was it?" he asked. "Rule 4. I couldn't bring myself to say more. He nodded once, unsurprised. "Most don't come back from that one." "Dave Miller. Did he?" "Stopped for a man in the road at mile marker 127. Robert interrupted. "Left his engine running, door open. Broke Rule 1. I thought of the voices outside my truck. We saw the other one. He opened his door, showed us his lights. "What are they?" I asked. Robert slid my final pay envelope across the counter. "Old as the forest, hungry as winter." He returned to his logbook. "You followed the rules. You get to leave. More than most can say." I took the envelope and walked out without another word. My pickup truck waited in the employee lot, covered in frost despite the morning sun having melted ice from every other vehicle. I scraped the windshield clean, revealing a single handprint pressed into the glass from the inside. I drove south without stopping, watching the landscape transform from black spruce forest to farmland to suburbs. With each mile, the events of the night receded like a bad dream, though the cold never quite left my bones. 3 days later, I crossed the Alberta-Montana border, putting provincial lines between me and Highway 63. Some roads aren't meant for normal traffic. Some rules aren't company policy but survival instructions. The white laminated card remained in my wallet, its 4 rules burned into my memory. A talisman against things that wait in northern forests, where the night lasts too long and children's laughter carries through the trees after midnight. A reminder that sometimes the only way to survive is to stop, kill your lights, and wait for dawn with your eyes closed and your doors locked, and hope that whatever circles your vehicle grows bored before it finds a way inside.